What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with another best ball draft on Underdog Fantasy for the 2024 NFL season. I'm going to be doing a solo show for you this afternoon, talking about some things as we get ready for the NFL's schedule release tomorrow evening. So we will finally be able to build around everyone's favorite topics, bye weeks and playoff week game stacks in weeks 15, 16, and 17. We'll have all that stuff confirmed for you starting with shows tomorrow evening. Best Ball Mania tracker, ADP tracker up for free here on OccupyFantasy.com. And you can see that some of the early movers are some of these rookie players that are getting a little bit more expensive. We see Tyrone Tracy here, rookie draft pick by the Giants at running back with the biggest positive change in ADP, up about a round and a half. Ben Sinnott at tight end for the Washington Commanders, also seeing a little bit of a rise. Zay Jones, new free agent signing at wide receiver here, going up around now that he is on a new roster. We have Keon Coleman, rookie wide receiver, first round pick for the Bills. Brian's favorite wide receiver, Rashid Shaheed. Lots of fun players to talk about here, moving up and down the ADP draft board. On the other side of the equation, players that are going down in ADP. These four players at the top here have completely dropped out of ADP whatsoever as of the most recent poll of data that we've done here with our tracker here. So ignore the first four here, but Drake May from the Patriots has dropped about a round and a half. Rashee Rice, I think rightly, has dropped a little over a round for the Kansas City Chiefs due to his legal issues. Couple of fringe Miami Dolphins players, Chuba Hubbard with the Carolina Panthers. So lots of moving parts here early in Best Ball Mania 5. It is PGA Championship week in the fantasy sports world, and there's really no better place to play different contests relative to PGA fantasy than Underdog Fantasy. Whether it's a major or another event, and we do have a major this week, you can play along with the action. Underdog is one of the biggest offerings in the golf game, from full round projections to single hole stats. So many options to pick from, including ones that are exclusively offered right here at Underdog. Get your pregame picks in or follow along with the in-game pick'em. It's all your choice. You can pick any of your favorite golfers here for the PGA Championship. Some of the contests are yet to be posted here as far as drafts are concerned for the PGA Championship, but I believe some of the higher or lower champions or straight up pick'em lines are available for you to build some fantasy lineups here on Underdog. And no surprise, our model is up on OccupyFantasy.com for the PGA Championship this week. And no surprise, Scotty Scheffler, the number one golfer in the world right now, is our favorite golfer this week. I'm looking forward to the plug article that Neil Ramada and Brian will post on OccupyFantasy.com likely by this evening or tomorrow morning, that will go over all of the best ways to attack the PGA Championship field. And you'll be able to use those players that those guys are high on in your Underdog pick'em slips and draft contests that they will have available for the PGA Championship. So looking forward to that here. Underdog Fantasy, one of the best places to play, not just PGA, but any sports fantasy contest you can put together. And Underdog has really upped the ante here with the deposit match bonus for you new users. There is an opportunity to sign up if you've never played a fantasy contest on Underdog before and receive a 50% deposit match on your first deposit up to $250. That means you can deposit $500 and get $250 free dollars to start playing fantasy contests right here on UnderdogFantasy.com, the best place to play different fantasy contests. I'm having the same issue I had on the last show with Derek in terms of getting the screen to show a draft board here. So give me 1 second here. I'll get us up and running, and then we'll be good to go here with a draft contest. Okay. I believe we are in good shape here. We're waiting for 5 more people to join the draft room here for an afternoon draft here on Tuesday, May 14th, a solid 3.5 months before the 2024 NFL season is going to kick off. So obviously, lots of room for things to go completely sideways after we draft this team today, and we have to be mindful of that as we're drafting our lineup. I don't think this is a time of the year where we have to get tremendously I was going to say creative. We don't have to get like tremendously crazy with our builds. We can definitely just stick with ADP, follow that, and then lean towards some of our favorite leans on plays in different ADP ranges. So, for example, I have some rankings that are posted in Occupy Fantasy's Discord, free best ball projections for our Discord subscribers. Discord just $2.99 a month. So if you want to be a member of our Discord and chat about all different kinds of fantasy sports contests, it's definitely a good place to be. Right now, you get access to free player projections for the 2024 NFL season that I've put in there. And basically for me, what I'm doing is taking my per game projections for each player, and I've basically plotted those against ADP. I've got my kind of off-site draft board here sorted by ADP, and I'll basically eyeball my projections and take my favorite player in different ranges as the draft builds and continues on. So that's basically how I tend to draft. So right here in the first round, I'm probably obviously going to have to wait and see what pick I get. But usually what I use is a tiebreaker between a bunch of players, especially now that I'm pretty early in my draft process and I don't really have tremendous exposure to anyone yet that I need to worry about. I'm just going to draft best player available in pretty much every single round that I can. I do tend to lean wide receiver heavy, grab some running back values in the middle and late rounds, and hope that ends up being the best way to advance out of the draft pod that I'm in here. We'll talk more about that as the draft continues here, but we got 3 spots open. So if anybody would like to join the draft and talk through things today, and most importantly, help me kind of tilt, if you will, by taking some of my favorite players out from underneath me, that option is certainly on the table here for you, and we certainly do appreciate your interest. We have a best ball guide that'll be coming out this week. I think at this point, with the schedule dropping tomorrow, I'll be able to finish the chapter in the guide about navigating bye weeks and week 17 matchups, week 16 matchups, week 15 matchups. One of the things we talked about on our shows a lot last year with Brian and Chuck and Moose and Ken, all of our guests that were on the channel, was actually emphasizing correlation in all 3 of the playoff weeks, because obviously we need to make sure that we're advancing out of these consecutive playoff pods here on Underdog to have a chance at the big prize, not just in Ball Mania 5 here, but really any other contest they offer. So that'll be something that we will emphasize heavily once we have that information in front of us tomorrow evening, talking about how to navigate the playoff matchups. For now, as we have our final 24, let's call it 32 hours of drafting without complete schedule information, I think the best thing to do is try to emphasize correlating with some division matchups. We know the NFL likes to keep excitement on the schedule as much as possible in the later weeks of the season. So I'm anticipating there will be division matchups, week 16, week 17, that we can leverage for some correlation in our lineups. So, for example, if you go with Christian McCaffrey here in the first round, if you get the first overall pick, I would advise looking for at least a little bit of correlation with other NFC West opponents of the 49ers, like the Seahawks and the Rams, etc. So I think that makes a little bit of sense at this point because it's the best information that we have. We know the NFL likes to emphasize division matchups in the later part of the season to keep fans engaged, not have the division matchups, playoff seeding matchups completely wrapped up going into the final week. And they're usually pretty good about that not being completely solidified everywhere. Obviously, there's always going to be a couple of teams that completely run away with things, but they do a pretty good job of keeping things pretty wide open here. We have filled this draft room. We are being assigned a draft slot right now as we speak. And what do you know? I have the 1-1, which means I have an interesting opportunity to actually discuss what to do at the turn, rounds 2 and 3. Lot of veteran drafters here in Underdog in this room. That's what those red badges mean. That is the highest level badge that you can have. Obviously, I'm shooting for that myself here. Not quite there yet. I think since this is my 4th team, I believe, and I have not yet had the number 1 pick, I am not going to overcomplicate this. I'm going to just take Christian McCaffrey. If you don't take Christian McCaffrey here when you have the first pick, you're not likely to get a chance to land him at 2 or 3, for example. So whereas if I pick 2nd or 3rd, or 4th even, I should have a pretty good chance to get some of these wide receivers. I do love these wide receivers here in the first round, but I want to make sure I'm at least in line with the field with exposure to Christian McCaffrey, as I do plan to draft the maximum number of teams in this contest, or as close to it as I can get, depending on how the summer shakes out here. So we'll move things along. We'll just lock in CMC here and put Sheb on the clock here. And now that I have the best running back in the game, according to the field, right? The number 1 pick in fantasy football. I'm feeling pretty good about going with a hero RB build around McCaffrey. I only need 2 running backs to contribute to my lineup each week, but I do need to start 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a quarterback. And we get a flex spot. I tend to want to see that flex spot get filled by some high upside ceiling games from wide receivers. So now that I feel like what I need is McCaffrey to just be the number one player in my lineup and be one of those 2 running backs scoring points for me every single week, I'm not going to worry a tremendous amount about chasing running backs here early on the draft board because wide receiver upside is aplenty here at the top. And as you'll see as the draft progresses here, if you've never watched a best ball stream just yet here to start the 2024 season, 4 in a row here, wide receivers move pretty quickly here. 24th and 25th picks coming up for me. The ADP range there means I'm probably looking at having players like Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs as the best available wide receivers. They're both 24th and 25th by ADP. Sam Laporta, the number one tight end you can consider, goes, as far as ADP anyway, goes 28th. I don't pick again until pick 48. So if I want to reach a little bit, I got to be mindful of the fact that if there's another elite tight end I want, like Travis Kelce or Trey McBride, maybe even Dalton Kincaid with the Bills, they're not likely to still be there for me at pick 49. So that is one dynamic to be aware of when you're picking on one of these barbell spots. You have to look at the ADP ranges going up or down about a round to see what is going to go and make sure you actually grab a player that you want in that range, because it's not super likely someone's going to make it back to you when you have to wait 23 picks. Brees Hall and Bijan come off. This is pretty much what you should expect for first-round running backs. Jahmyr Gibbs as well. That's kind of the way that these things have gone in the first few that I've done, and I've seen others do. Saquon and Jonathan Taylor will be the next couple of running backs that come off in the second round. Kyron Williams, Devin Achane with the Dolphins as well, goes pretty early. Really, the only other one I'm kind of interested in these first 2 rounds with, as far as workload upside that I would probably want to get overexposed to, is Kyron Williams. We saw how effective he was with the Rams last year with the volume of touches that he got. I don't think any of these other guys are going to approach that. And that's why he's my favorite in this range. The next tier down, round 3, 4, I like Travis Etienne with the Jaguars. More on running backs in a little bit. Garrett Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. at the turn here for Red DX92. Pretty common end to the first, beginning of the second round there. And we have a lot, as I said, we're going to see a lot of receivers flying here. I'm expecting to have Mike Evans and Stephon Diggs as the best options. I don't really love either one in this spot. I would lean toward Evans over Diggs personally. So that's kind of where I'm at here as I watch the draft board develop. All right. You have any questions? Those of you that are watching the show, I know there's really only a handful of you. Please drop them in the chat. I'd be happy to talk about anything that you guys want to talk about if you're around watching a fantasy football draft on a Tuesday afternoon when you probably should be working or being a little bit more productive with your bad selves. So Brandon Ayuk comes off. I do think Ayuk is my preferred receiver to Debo in the 49ers wide receiver room, at least at the top of the board here. But I do think I need to be a little tempted to get the high upside stack with Brock Purdy if Debo somehow falls to me second, third round here. Drafting these guys at their ceiling, obviously, but definitely think we don't see San Francisco being a complete drop-off from last year. And Brock Purdy's ADP being right around pick 100, we can get him in probably the 9th round here. Would definitely make that an interesting way to get a primary stack here at the top of the draft board with one of the best teams in the NFC. Josh Allen was a player that I was hoping would come back to me here. That's why I made him the cover boy of the stream. But landing the number 1 pick probably was not the most likely outcome that he was going to make it back to me here. So we move on. Actually, a little bit ahead of ADP for Josh Allen, frankly. Hit him with the gritty, taking him 19th. Josh Allen typically goes 32nd right now on Underdog. So basically around a little bit around early, but probably correct if he was worried about someone else going after him. Kyron comes off the board. Achane comes off the board. And Drake London is gone. So Debo, Nico Collins, Mike Evans. these are the wide receivers that are still on the board, awaiting Sheb's pick here. I'm interested to see what he does. So he takes Debo. That's fine. I am going to take my favorite wide receiver here, and it's going to be Mike Evans. I know that everybody's really excited about the Houston Texans after what we saw CJ Stroud develop into last year, but Evans here, still the top flight wide receiver one for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield, now being drafted a little bit closer to his ceiling in the second round. I think there's a clearer workload here for him than this competition between Collins, Diggs, and Dell here at the top of the board. Underdog seems to think that Nico Collins is the better pick to Stephon Diggs, projected to score about 20 more fantasy points, but they also seem to think that DJ Moore is a better pick than either of these two guys, with 220 projected fantasy points this season compared to the two of them. And I actually also agree. I have more ahead of Collins and Diggs in my own projections. So I'm going to go in and take DJ Moore as my second wide receiver in this spot. And I'm going to punt on the Texans stack here. I just think they were a little too expensive this season. I'm going to have to force myself, I think, to get exposure to these guys if the ADP doesn't drop at all throughout the spring and the summer. But I feel a little bit better about these other players in this range. I know that Evans has Godwin to compete with for touches. Godwin's ADP is pretty reasonable. I know DJ Moore has Roma Dunze and Keenan Allen to compete with. I would say they both also have pretty reasonable ADPs. They also have quarterbacks that are going way lower on the draft board. CJ Stroud is going to go right around pick 50, right here in the fifth round, whereas Baker Mayfield is going to be available around pick 157, and Caleb Williams is going to be available around pick 95. So I can do a little bit better job, I think, of waiting to take a quarterback and be able to pair a high upside wide receiver with their starting quarterback closer to round 9 through 13, 14, instead of having to worry about taking Stroud here in the fourth and fifth round. Stroud, I think, is a phenomenal player, but if we talk about the elite, high-end, high-upside quarterbacks, I think your big four is Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, guys that are going to average right around 22 to 23 fantasy points per game. I would even think Anthony Richardson may threaten that with his rushing ability. We saw him lead the league in fantasy points per snap last season at the quarterback position. Those are all guys in the early part of drafts at quarterback that I like better than CJ Stroud. So relative to ADP, I just think CJ Stroud is going too high this year. Phenomenal quarterback. If he was going closer to, like the Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Baker Mayfield ADP range, I would be far more interested. I think as a pocket passer, I'm going to be passing, pun intended, on CJ Stroud at that high ADP right now. Unless, like I said, I'm forcing myself to diversify a little bit more. As we get deeper into the summer, hope to get some closing line value. Maybe he drops a little bit in cost as things move on. So I think every single show that we've done so far, I've talked about how I think the Texans are overpriced, but I know that not everybody tunes into the same content, so I want to make sure we're repeating the early takeaways. And some of these buys and fades and stuff like that will be detailed in our best ball guide that is going to be coming out this week. So you won't have to just go back and watch every single show that we put out to keep up with the information. I know a lot of you guys and gals like to do that, and you like to rewatch our shows and consume the content that way. But we know that a lot of you guys and gals prefer the written word, and we're going to make sure that you have some access to that as well. Some of our thoughts on paper, some of the lessons we've learned over the years as a staff playing all these different contests. Lots of great different options, not just mass multi-entry options like the Puppy, the Chihuahua, or Ball Mania V, which I'm drafting here on the show today. There's obviously single entry contests, 3 max entry contests that Underdog has available as well. So for those of you that aren't necessarily going to be high volume drafters, those are probably the best places to play your leans and just maybe reach a little bit and take your favorite players, because you're not going to have opportunities to diversify. And we'll go over that in our guide for you as well. As you can see here, a ton of orange on the board. Orange meaning wide receivers take it. Not a ton of blue, not a ton of purple, only one purple, and far less green for the running back position than anything else you can look at. That's going to be the common thing every single time you see a draft board here on Underdog, probably in your home leagues when we get around to doing that later in the summer. It is a wide receiver heavy draft board now at the top. And I agree with it, if that makes sense. I think this is probably the way people should be considering drafting rosters moving forward, because I think there's a little bit better floor with wide receivers now than some of these running backs. Understand the injury means the running back is going to give you absolutely nothing, which is why it's really terrifying to draft a running back like McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round, because the downside risk here, I think, way, way higher than these wide receivers who are going to give you a little bit safer production week in and week out, a little less susceptible to missing a ton of time. And the production at the running back position far more replaceable than at wide receiver, at the top of the board, at least with some of these players, right? So Christian McCaffrey goes down. We have free players, at least as far as ADP is concerned, at running back, and Eli Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Isaac Arendo, that immediately get thrust into fantastic roles that we can buy at the bottom of the draft board. But if a CeeDee Lamb goes down, those targets just kind of get redistributed to the other Cowboy wide receivers like Brandon Cooks and even Jake Ferguson at tight end. So there's really not as many opportunities to leverage potential injuries at that position. Not going to be able to land an elite quarterback in Lamar Jackson here early. Surprised to see Isaiah Pacheco going up in cost a little bit here, but that's okay. I think I can survive without him. Dalton Kincaid comes off the board here. I'm a little interested in Trey McBride at this spot as probably the number one tight end. I have him as my favorite tight end in fantasy football this year. He is ahead of Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, and Sam Laporta for me as at the tight end position. So if Sheb takes him here, good for him. He's got the best tight end on the board. I'm going to wait on the position now because I just feel like this is a tier break moment. I might do Mark Andrews, actually. I don't want to allow him to linger much longer if he's still here. So we have him, and then we have an opportunity to take a potential quarterback upgrade for the Steelers with George Pickens, no more Deontay Johnson. The combination of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields may be kind of interesting here for Pickens. I guess I am invested in this Bears stack a little bit with DJ Moore already on my roster. So I think I will actually pass on Pickens here and actually try to get a little bit more Chicago Bears in my lineup here. So we went with Mark Andrews, lead tight end, Keenan Allen, wide receiver. And now I don't have to worry about drafting a tight end until really the end here to solidify the position a little bit. I kind of like that I just kind of on the fly there went with the Bears stack instead of George Pickens, because I'm not personally very excited about the Steelers, but I do like the fact that he has far less competition now for touches. And I would prefer to see Justin Fields get the nod over Russell Wilson. Maybe I'm on an island there. I just think that we've seen enough of what Russell Wilson is capable of over the last few seasons. Christian Kirk, ADP has not really moved despite Calvin Ridley leaving the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think he's another good buy in this range as well. Amari Cooper, one of my favorite receivers last year, still right there in this range. Xavier Worthy from the Chiefs has really seen quite a rise at wide receiver in ADP. Probably wide open Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver room as he comes off the board here to humble legend. So, like I said, a lot of orange still on the board here. And Mark Andrews, going back to my pick at the end of round 4, this is the clear tier break. I thought he was already off the board. You have Laporta, Kelce, Kincaid, McBride, and Andrews as kind of the big 5 at tight end here. I do think there's clear separation there in this group. George Kittle, probably the next best, but I think that's clearly tier 2 because the 49ers just have so many weapons there. Evan Engram, Jake Ferguson, David Njoku, my other favorite tight ends that are still available in this range, but very different than last year where we had Travis Kelce as a bona fide first-round draft pick. Third, fourth round is sort of the sweet spot here for owners to grab an elite tight end. And so now basically half the board has one tight end, whereas half the board doesn't. So that's something to be aware of as it comes back around to me. Some of these other owners, not necessarily the two right next to me, because we all just grabbed tight ends here in the 4th round, are going to probably be looking for this second tier group of guys as we go through the next couple of rounds here. Njoku being available at pick 100. Kittle goes around pick 67. So we got about 3 rounds here where these owners sort of in the middle of the draft board here will probably soak up those picks, and maybe some of these receivers, running backs that haven't been taken yet will fall a little bit more. See, I just every single time, if these two guys are available right next to each other, I'm going to click on Anthony Richardson over CJ Stroud. In fantasy football, I think Anthony Richardson is clearly the more valuable asset with his rushing upside. That is a comfortable take for me. I don't particularly care if anybody disagrees with it. It feels very, very easy to be in on Anthony Richardson over CJ Stroud with those two being drafted so closely together this season. Kyle Pitts comes off. So another owner that needed a tight end now off the board. We're about 33% of the way through this contest. It's not super likely. I don't think I'm going to be actually looking for another Chicago Bear. And I was just about to say it's not super likely Roma Dunze makes it back to me. I'm okay with that. It's pretty clear now, though, that I should be prioritizing Caleb Williams. And I may have to reach a little bit here because Badass Mofo may actually take him out from under me now that he has a Dunze at the other end of the draft board here. So I do think I'm probably going to aggressively break a rule here and take Caleb Williams about a round too early. But because I have the double stack lined up, I think it's only fitting that I make sure I get my guy here for this roster. ADP isn't particularly going to matter a tremendous amount here in May compared to August and September anyway. So that is kind of what I'm thinking at this point based off of the way that I have put this roster together thus far. And yes, I'll be interested in Mayfield closer to the end of the contest with Mike Evans, the number one wide receiver for the Buccaneers, also already on my roster. We look at some of the ADP by team. That's one of my favorite ways to use the ADP tracker on OccupyFantasy.com. We look at Chicago and DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, DeAndre Swift has not yet gone. I think that's too many Bears. I don't want to have four players from the same offense in the same roster. I think that's a little bit too much correlation, especially when it's not a team like the Chiefs or the Bills where things are going to be a little bit more spread out. I'm kind of at this point putting my eggs in the basket of Moore and Allen are the guys that you want here in the Bears offense. And if I need those other guys to contribute, I feel like I'm spreading myself a little too thin. Probably want to look for some of the better assets on these other teams that are still available instead of going the Chicago route here. So that's just kind of where my head is at as I look to build out my roster here at the 6-7 turn, really throughout the contest. So even though Swift is going to have a higher ADP than Caleb Williams, a little bit more interested in Caleb Williams in this spot. And it's definitely a reach. I'm not going to argue that it's not. But as some of these other players come off, Keon Coleman was someone I was kind of interested in here. George Kittle is here if I want to actually double down at tight end. And go with Brock Purdy later. That's also kind of interesting. But I feel like that might not be the right way to go here. I like Chris Godwin. I really like Brian Thomas here. But given the way that I'm now trying to get with Tampa Bay players, I'm going to go with Godwin here. And I am, like I said, going to reach past ADP a little bit and make sure that I get Caleb Williams, the rookie number one pick here in this draft, to pair with my Bears stack on this roster. Chris Godwin and Caleb Williams in round 6 and round 7. And now we're cooking with gas here. We're working towards a pretty interesting Bears, Tampa Bay stack here. On both kind of sides of the stack board here at my wide receiver positions. George Kittle immediately off right after I passed on him. David Montgomery. Still just Christian McCaffrey as my only running back on this team. I'm very okay with that. We're in a range now where there are some other running backs I'm interested in. I will start considering. Will not name them in case the other users here are now watching this stream trying to see what I'm doing. But if you've watched a couple of our other shows, there are some of our favorite hero to zero RB build targets in this range. Chuck and I, Derek and I, Brian and Waleed have talked about on the streams thus far this season that still haven't necessarily seen their prices fully adjusted or corrected for the upside in their offenses. A lot of the ones that I'm hoping to land here are likely to get drafted before I come back at pick 96. I see players being drafted between pick 90 and 94 that I really like here. Tony Pollard from the Titans and Zach Moss from the Bengals being two of my favorites here. The Javonte Williams ADP for the Broncos, right around pick 104, is one that I'm steering clear of. We have seen some quotes now from Sean Payton where he's basically not touting or talking up Javonte Williams as much as the other running backs in that Broncos backfield. So I think that's a really good team to target some of the lower ADP Bronco running backs for ceiling performances in our lineups this fall. And if we look at the Broncos ADPs, Javonte has the highest ADP on the team, but we can get Jaleel McLaughlin in round 15 and pretty much everybody else completely for free in round 18. So that's one way to definitely get a little different with your builds and have some more upside with a 0 RB potential target. Kyler Murray finally comes off pick 83. Aaron Jones and JSN off the board. Just trying to keep up with the picks as they fly by here. And okay, there goes Swift. Finally. Top running backs. Kind of interesting to see Zamir White slipping a little bit here past ADP. Probably not going to make it to me, but that's a player that I would take immediately if he's somehow still on the board at the end of the round here. At the top of the board here, I highly doubt that's going to happen. Tony Pollard would be a player that I would really love to see fall a few picks to me as the clear top tight end running back now for the Tennessee Titans as one of his teammates in DeAndre Hopkins goes to CDE Carl 24 here out of the 11 hole. I like the start Reddick's 92 here had, going 4 straight wide receivers. Now he's starting to kind of build out his other positions. A little bit of an unorthodox double tight end tap here in the middle rounds, but I definitely think this is a very different way to build a roster. And he still has plenty of outs here with Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford and Kirk Cousins available to him at quarterback to get some pairings here. So this is a really interesting roster on the other end of the barbell with back-to-back picks. Kind of been paying attention to that as the show has gone on. Rashee Rice dropping like a rock with all of the legal allegations. Definitely feel like he's one of the players that I want to avoid until we see some clarity on what his availability is going to be as far as on the field this season, and clarity with the ADP as well. Kind of catching a falling knife at this point to draft Rashee Rice. We know that he's a talented player. That's not the issue. The issue is he going to be allowed to play football for as many games as we need him to? There's definitely an argument that any potential penalty he faces will be at the beginning of the season. So obviously, if you're drafting purely for playoff week upside, and if you want to ignore the real life implications of him potentially being a terrible person, allegedly, we want to be mindful of the fact that we want a player on our roster that can contribute in the playoff weeks and help us beat our opponents with potentially a low advance rate. And Rashee Rice, I guess, definitely fits that build, that mindset as a wide receiver. If you're looking for a reason to talk yourself into taking him here right now while things are very uncertain in terms of his pending availability with all of the different stories that have come out with him in recent weeks. Pretty unfortunate all around to see a young man like that put himself through that and make those choices and potentially jeopardize his income producing ability for his family and whatnot. But that's too heavy of a subject for a best ball stream. Tony Pollard not going to be joining the squad this particular afternoon. Neither is Zach Moss. I'm going to have to force myself to not take this player in this range because it just seems too obvious to me that this is the best ceiling running back left available in this range. Wasn't talking about Jaylen Warren. On our last show, I ended up taking this player. It's going to be Nick Chubb with the Cleveland Browns right here around pick 100. I mean, definitely feel like he can absolutely outplay this ADP if he looks anything like the player we know that he is when he returns to the lineup for Cleveland. So McCaffrey and Chubb, very, very strong start to building out my wide receiver, running back room, I would say in this range. And then I am going to go with Curtis Samuel. I just want pieces of good offenses. And I feel like he's got a really good chance to be one of Josh Allen's favorite targets in this particular range of wide receivers where they're drafted. He's one of my favorites right here. So that's why we're going to welcome Curtis Samuel to the squad on this particular show as well. We got a quarterback, 2 running backs, 5 receivers, and a tight end. Very typical start through 9 rounds for me. I will probably land on about 8 wide receivers, 5 to 6 running backs, 2 to 3 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks. It's typically how I build teams. And if you go and review some of the data from previous iterations of this large field contest, that tends to be pretty close to the optimal build as well. So kind of going to stick to that guardrail pretty much every single time I draft a team. First share of Curtis Samuel for me, much higher cost compared to last year. But once he joined the Buffalo Bills and they traded Diggs away, they let Gabriel Davis walk, they drafted Keon Coleman in the first round, but haven't really done much else at the position thus far. Curtis Samuel in a pretty good spot right now. There is a new member of the Buffalo Bills to be aware of. The transaction was announced this morning. Former Green Bay Packer, former Kansas City Chief, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is now going to be calling Buffalo home here in 2024 and certainly could be an interesting downfield threat, high ceiling weapon with Josh Allen. So I'll be interested to see where his ADP starts to normalize. Without being employed, he basically was being drafted directly at the end of contest, 216th overall. I may be interested in taking a shot on him, regardless of correlation with the Bills. If his ADP stays in that range, I highly doubt that it will. I think we will see his cost go up a decent amount now that we know that he's anchored to Josh Allen, one of the best weapons, one of the highest drafted quarterback actually in the contest on average right now, and even higher today with Hit Him with the Gritty drafting him at pick number 19. And he is still looking for a partner to pair with Josh Allen. But now that I notice we have Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Anthony Richardson all on the same roster there, I got to be honest, I'm really questioning what the mindset is here. I think that's too much quarterback in the first 5 rounds of your draft board. I would not advise anybody draft like this. I think this is not the best way to do it. Just does not feel like that follows what all the data tells us about how to draft teams over the last several years in this format. So a little bit of quarterback hoarding there. It doesn't really look like he's drafting like crazy ADPs. He took 3 quarterbacks pretty quickly here. I think that's pretty bad, to be honest. Cortland Sutton, Tyler Lockett, Dallas Goedert come off the board here. Still some decent name brand values, if you will, at tight end here. Namely, TJ Hawkinson, Dalton Schultz. Hawkinson coming off of an injury late in the season for the Vikings. Cole Kmet on my Chicago Bears on this team. My favorite tight end that's still available is going to be a brand new asset, a rookie asset from, I'll talk about him hopefully if I get a chance to draft him in a couple of rounds. But I definitely like the unknown commodities a little bit more in this range of the draft because it gives us an opportunity to bet more on the ceiling and the upside than anything else here. Another veteran that I think goes too low, like Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, right here in the middle of drafts, right on the round 9-10 turn. I'm going to be buying him in this range pretty much all spring and summer long if he doesn't move whatsoever. Obviously, a split backfield with Brian Robinson in Washington, but Austin Eckler, we know what his ceiling is, and we know he's going to give us spike week potential here in the middle of the draft board, which is the biggest reason to be interested in him as kind of a 1A, 1B running back with the Commanders this afternoon. Any questions? If you're still hanging around, certainly appreciate you being here watching the show. I would be happy to answer them. We're about halfway through the draft here. We're going to be bringing 4 to 5 shows per week here on this channel. Myself, Brian, Derek, Chuck, all the staff members, Moose, Waleed, all spring and summer long, drafting different Underdog fantasy contests for you throughout the spring and the summer. And notice we had, this kind of sea of orange here in the first 6-7 rounds. When you get to round 8, 9, 10, this is where the wide receiver kind of valley of death, if you will, begins. There's just not really a ton of wide receiver talent or picks made in this range. So that's why I think it's really critical that you get a lot of the guys early while you still have the chance. On the clock here at pick 120, I think my favorite pick in this range at running back is not an exciting one by any stretch of the imagination, but Ezekiel Elliott with the Dallas Cowboys should have a really good chance to lead them in high value touches, and probably has the highest ceiling of the running backs available in this range with the clearest path anyway. 2 touches. Not tremendously interested in reaching for another receiver here. Tight end that I'm interested in should still be available in another round or so. I think I'm just going to go with best wide receiver available that I think is here in this range, and that's going to be Jacoby Myers with the Las Vegas Raiders, right on ADP here. So that's my picks here in rounds 10 and 11. Jacoby Myers feels like he's going too low as a clear wide receiver 1B to Devontae Adams, going to have about a 20% target share in the Raiders offense. I don't think you can really say that about any of these other receivers that are still available in this spot. So probably one of those players I'm going to have to force myself to stop taking. And I think I've taken Jacoby Myers on almost every single show that I've done on this channel so far this year. So definitely one of the undervalued players in the draft board, in my opinion, right now. Jacoby Myers with the Las Vegas Raiders. Now we're looking at a 1-3-6-1. Still really no reason for me to reach tremendously for anything that is here. A little bit more incentive to go for Baker Mayfield than any other quarterback left. And so we have, I think, probably a good argument to take him here at the next turn, even though it's a little ahead of his ADP, just to make sure that I get it. And then I can probably be done with the quarterback position here. That's probably the best way for me to handle the next picks as they come around to me in this range. Pick 144 to 145. I'm probably going to start taking some home run swings at running back. So Zach Charbonnet behind Kenneth Walker, Jerome Ford behind Nick Chubb, Dowdle in that somewhat ambiguous Cowboys backfield would be a good option. I already have Elliott, so I don't think I want to double down there. Rookie Jalen Wright with the Dolphins competing with Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Devin Achan for touches. Probably widest range of outcomes here, high ceiling, super low floor. Marshawn Lloyd with the Packers probably slides right into a role behind Josh Jacobs there in Green Bay. Ty Chandler competing with Aaron Jones, probably my favorite pick in this range. We've seen Aaron Jones be like a 1A to running back with A.J. Dillon over the last couple of years. We saw Ty Chandler be pretty effective with the Vikings last season late, so I think that's a player that I like in this range. Ray Davis, a rookie that just joined the Bills. Very interesting to see Kamani Vidal going ahead of J.K. Dobbins now. I feel like this is definitely my fellow fantasy bros touting Vidal quite a bit. Dobbins having some brutal injuries. This is definitely a backfield you probably want to diversify on a bit. As of this moment, I do think now that Dobbins is a little bit of a cheaper cost, I would lean towards getting some of him versus Vidal because it feels like the Vidal hype is getting a little out of control at this point. I've also already taken Kamani Vidal on a couple of teams, so looking to get Gus Edwards and JK on my teams a little bit more on my end of things here. Gabe Davis, a significantly lower cost on the Jacksonville Jaguars compared to on the Buffalo Bills. Latavian Wicks, Jerry Jeudy. I'm just making sure that I'm caught up on what is flying off the board here. Lot of interesting wide receivers. Jahan Dotson on the Commanders behind Terry McLaurin. Brandon Cooks, is he a little more interesting now that Michael Gallup's out of the picture? You pretty much put Michael Gallup out of the picture last season anyway as it is. Josh Downs, very, very strong role with Gardner Minshew last season. We'll see if that carries over to Anthony Richardson being back. A couple of rookie first-round picks with Xavier Legette and Ricky Pearsall as well. I think I'm definitely in on a potential wide receiver in this range also, depending on how things shake out. Ricky Pearsall, it's really tough to see him getting a ton of touches with Debo and Brandon Ayuk still there on that roster. There was a pretty hot rumor that the 49ers would be trying to trade one of those guys during the NFL draft, but that obviously did not come to pass. So I think that pretty much holds down the ceiling of any other wide receiver on that offense until there's potentially a change there. Justin Herbert at quarterback comes off. All right. So I kind of have an idea of what I want to do here. There's a tight end that I really like, and Baker Mayfield is a quarterback that this build is pretty high on. So I think those are what the next two picks are going to be for me. A little ahead of ADP for the quarterback, but he's going to be important to the correlation on the roster that I've built so far. So if you've been watching the screen, you know which two players I want to see fall to me here. And as we inch closer and closer to picks 144 and 145, I'm greatly anticipating getting exactly what I want here, which would be certainly the preferred outcome for me, and it would help me land on a 2-3-7, a 2-3-6-2 build. And I think I'll be done at quarterback and tight end if I get exactly what I want here. I can focus on some running back swings, a couple more wide receivers to close out this particular draft board this afternoon in Best Ball Mania 5. So that is the game plan. Let's see if our opponents allow us to execute it. Sheb taking us right down to the wire, takes rookie 49er Ricky Pearsall, so I can pretty much double tap Ben Sinnott and Baker Mayfield. I really like the upside with Sinnott in this Commanders offense. We've seen Sinnott do a lot in college. He had a ton of receptions last season, I believe like 60 receptions in that neighborhood. That's a pretty good indicator that he's a target hog as a tight end anyway, and should be able to step into a large role right away on the Commanders underneath for Jaden Daniels. Have to hope that he ends up being a little bit of a safety valve there. But I think it's basically, if you look at him as a tight end that has a chance to have like a 15% target share and give you like 8-9 plus fantasy points per game as a clear tight end one on his own offense, then you're looking at a tight end that is going a little too low by ADP standards. I think he's like the 17th tight end off the board by ADP. I think he's definitely a top 12 tight end. We're not talking about a tremendous difference here, admittedly, in points, but I think it's a player you can kind of buy low on here, because I actually do think if you do the math and you see what the projections say, this is a player that probably should be going a little bit closer to this group up here with Bowers and Njoku, Goddard, and even Hawkinson. Hawkinson's price is depressed due to injury here. So that's my thoughts on this range of tight end. Some of my running backs that I was talking about in this range coming off the board, no surprise. But Jerome Ford, Rico Dowdle, two guys I'm not necessarily going to be interested in since I have Nick Chubb and Ezekiel Elliott already on my roster here. Got 5 picks left to wrap up this show. Really appreciate any of you that are still with us or watching this on replay. Should mention again, we have a free ADP tracker here on OccupyFantasy.com. You can use that to filter by team and see where you have to select different players if you want to aim for a specific stack. I find this to be tremendously useful while I'm drafting, once I know that I have a player from a certain spot, to see what I can do to correlate. Tampa Bay, for example, I did just take Baker Mayfield. I have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, so I'm pretty much done there. But had I just started with selecting Mike Evans in the 3rd round, I could have come here, looked at the ADPs in recent weeks, and plotted out Godwin in round 7, Mayfield right around round 14 to make it work. As it stands, we basically got both of them right around those picks anyway. So really interesting resource, I think, and that's why we're happy to offer it completely for free on OccupyFantasy.com as a resource for anybody that wants to get started drafting here on Underdog here in 2024. And once again, thanks to fine folks over at Underdog. They've extended a more generous first-time user sign-up bonus here in the month of May. For this month, you can get a 50% deposit match up to $250. So that means you can deposit up to $500 to start playing fantasy contests, drafting fantasy teams on Underdog Fantasy, and get $250 in site credit as well. Pretty good deal if you ask me. Minimum deposit of $10 to get that 50% deposit bonus credit here this month. That's the offer that the fine folks here at Underdog are currently running. J.K. Dobbins in this particular draft is going to go ahead of Kamani Vidal, so we will not have the option of drafting him. And as it stands, they go back-to-back here. Very ambiguous Chargers backfield. Those two and Gus Edwards are at the top of the depth chart, and it's very interesting to me that Gus Edwards is going as like the clear top running back here, where I don't think it's necessarily as clear as this ADP difference suggests. So these two guys in round 14, 15, Dobbins and Vidal, very good buys, I would say, relative to Edwards in terms of what you have to invest on your own draft board for that potential upside. Jalen Polk, drafted at the top of the second round by the New England Patriots, could potentially be a wide receiver one in a very ambiguous wide receiver room. Wide range of outcomes with that Patriots offense, but probably a really good player to take a gamble on down here as well. We're coming up shortly here in about half a round, and I would like to get 2 to 3 more running backs and 2 wide receivers. That's kind of what I'm thinking I need here to close out this roster, just to fill out the bench a little bit. So that's what we're targeting here. Marvin Mims with the Broncos comes off. Player that I don't know how I feel about Marvin Mims yet. I'll have to do a Broncos deep dive, maybe get ready for the next show talking about the Denver Broncos. What is still here? It's interesting to me that Tyler Algier, Antonio Gibson. Gibson's definitely a running back that I really, really like behind Ramondre Stevenson in the Patriots backfield, especially as more of a third down pass catching specialist type back. Played wide receiver in college at Memphis, so we know the Patriots as an organization philosophically like players that are capable of doing different things. He's a player that could potentially have a little bit more of a role in the passing game for the Patriots. I think he's kind of the highest floor running back left on the board here, but also with access to a tremendous ceiling if anything does happen with Ramondre Stevenson. And as long as he doesn't get scooped here out from under me by Preston Pipes or Sheb, who each already have 4 running backs, he's probably going to be one of my 2 picks here in rounds 14 and 15. Seems like a pretty clear player I should be targeting with only 3 running backs still on my roster. Malachi Corley comes off at wide receiver, so I get the chance to do what I want here. I can lock in Antonio Gibson, and then don't feel passionately about any of these players. I was high on Michael Wilson until Zay Jones signed with the Arizona Cardinals. I think I'll take Javon Baker as well I don't know if I want to do that. That's a little too much New England here at the end of the board. I feel like the kombucha meme. Like maybe, no. Throwing a dart, Tyler Boyd with the Tennessee Titans. Don't feel like this ADP is normalized. Feel like there's a little more upside there. We know what quality player he is. Probably think he ends up getting drafted a little bit closer to this range as well. So those are my 2 picks here, rounds 14 and 15. Antonio Gibson at running back and Tyler Boyd at wide receiver. New member of the Tennessee Titans. 3 picks left. I'm going to aim for 2 more running backs and another wide receiver. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And there's really a lot of options, so I'm not really tremendously married to anything here. I'm just going to see how this kind of shakes out. But at this spot on the board, it's a good point to just kind of say, don't worry about ADP at this point. It's going to change so much here at the bottom of the board, depending on news items, transactions, potential stacks people are targeting in the playoff weeks, because that's what's most important in these large field tournaments on Underdog, that the ADP down here at the bottom of the board is really, really irrelevant. Just focus on, I think, what you think you need on your rosters. And there's still quarterbacks down here that you can take. This is probably another lesson as far as not reaching a tremendous amount for your quarterbacks if you don't have the correlations necessarily to emphasize. Deshaun Watson definitely, I think, has quarterback one upside. Will Levis has far better weapons this season than he did last season with Calvin Ridley and now Tyler Boyd joining DeAndre Hopkins, Tony Pollard at running back alongside Tyjae Spears, and Chig Okonkwo at tight end, completely free. Definitely a lot of upside there. Even Aaron Rodgers, way down here at the bottom of the board, definitely underpriced. Obviously going to be tough to come back from his Achilles injury, but you can pair him pretty easily with one of his top weapons if you do get one of those guys in the first round of your draft. I'm talking about Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. So, any final subjects I should cover here? I guess once again, get ready for the PGA Championship this week. Underdog has some of the best PGA golf fantasy contests available to you that you can consider in the industry, and you should be seeing those come out over the next 24 to 48 hours as we get ready for the PGA Championship this upcoming Thursday. We'll have 3 to 4 more shows on this channel throughout the rest of this week. We will announce that schedule in the Discord when it becomes available as well. Best Ball Guide will be coming this week. We'll have projections, not just an ADP tracker, but actual projections you can look at for free on the website. Right now, they're available in our Discord for our Discord subscribers, but we're working on migrating those to the website for you. Don't forget about Pick'em Champions in eligible states. I know here, Underdog, now in Florida, you can play their peer-to-peer Champions Pick'em fantasy game, which was not available until really, really recently, within the last month or so. So welcome those of you from Florida that have not yet been able to play on Underdog. You folks especially should be looking at taking advantage of the really generous May sign-up offer of a 50% deposit match up to $250 on your first deposit. Deposit up to $500, you can get a $250 match. Extremely, extremely strong program that Underdog is running here. Definitely one of the biggest reasons we like being associated with this company is they're very, very generous to their customers. Kate Otten comes off the board at tight end. I think with 2 tight ends that I feel good about, I'm not necessarily looking at any of them, but if you have targets down here, you still feel like you need one. I mentioned Chig Okonkwo already in this range. Tyler Conklin with the Jets, also pretty easy to pair with Aaron Rodgers if you need him. Jonnu Smith with the Dolphins, I think that's a clear upgrade on Durham Smythe for the Miami Dolphins, and we saw him be pretty effective in the Falcons offense last year. Mike Gesicki now on the Bengals probably stands to have a better role with Joe Burrow than he did with the Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi combination with the Patriots last year. Tucker Kraft with the Packers. Dawson Knox with the Bills if there's some issues at wide receiver. Those are some of my favorite targets down here if you still need a tight end. Tyler Higbee, also coming off of a brutal injury, may miss some games at the beginning of the year, but still will probably have a big role with Matthew Stafford in that Rams offense in the weeks that we're most concerned about late in the season. And he's basically free as well at the tight end position, which is obviously something worth thinking about if you're looking purely for ceiling plays here at the end of the draft board. Player that I was considering at the spot where I took Tyler Boyd almost makes it all the way back to me in Javon Baker. Wide receiver pickings are pretty slim at this point. I do want to take like a home run swing, though, with one of them. I don't mind Demario Douglas just because we've already seen him have the volume down here. J.J. McCarthy comes off. Isaiah Likely, definitely a good pick if you don't own Mark Andrews like I do. If you're betting on an injury there, potentially bailing you out with some upside with Likely. Maybe Likely even has a little bit of a role with Andrews active. That's another thing that could absolutely happen in Baltimore's pass catching core, if you will, between wide receiver and tight ends. All right. Derek Carr. Okay. Pretty underwhelming group, I would say, here of running backs that are still available to take. Khalil Herbert probably seems to be like the most interesting one in this range as far as having access to a ceiling if he's still on the Chicago Bears. Becomes a fourth Bear, which may be a rule that I don't typically want to break, but we do have an opportunity to see him get moved according to recent news reports. So that would absolutely be helpful for us as far as being invested in him on this roster. And then I'm just going to go with Demario Douglas with the Patriots. Now that I have Gibson and Douglas, I guess I could consider Drake May potentially as a third quarterback. I don't think I'm going to go that route, though. Two quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 8 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. And definitely think I'm right in line with what I typically end up doing in these contests. So as we bring it home here down the stretch, watch the final round come off the board. This has been another Underdog Fantasy Draft brought to you by Occupy Fantasy. Appreciate those of you watching. If you hung out for a little or a lot of your time this afternoon, certainly appreciate that. We will be back with more shows this week, scheduled to be announced in our Discord, and we'll be drafting not just Best Ball Mania 5 contests here on this channel, but some of the other contests as well that are available to you to consider. We have so many of them to consider here on Underdog. There is the big dog for you high rollers, $500 an entry. You can get 64 entries in this contest if you're feeling super ambitious there. The puppy, first iteration of this $5 150 max, filling up pretty quickly, awards $50,000 to first place. It's definitely targeted towards those of you with medium-sized bankrolls. With the $250 first-time user deposit match bonus, the 50% bonus. You can deposit $500, get a $250 match, and I'm pretty sure that means you can max the puppy right off of your first deposit. If that's something you're interested in, you can draft 150 puppy teams right off the bat here. Credit to you if that's something that you're interested in. $4 Chihuahua, just a healthy 25 max, $30,000 to first place. Really, really healthy payout structure here as well. So options up and down the price points here for everyone. There was like a $10 single entry contest called the Golden that was available last week. That filled pretty quickly. Underdog will be releasing new contests as we go throughout the entire summer, and they'll be releasing like Puppy 2, 3, Chihuahua 2, 3, et cetera, as things progress as well. So there's definitely a lot of drafting ahead of us for the rest of the spring and the summer here, and plenty of reason to stay engaged with the channel here because we will keep fresh content coming out about fantasy football as we move through the rest of the spring and the summer here. Rookie Will Shipley joining the Eagles backfield, I think definitely makes it harder to just kind of shove in on Kenneth Gainwell here at the end of drafts, which is something that we've all done, I think, over the last couple of seasons. But I like the fact that Gainwell is so accessible down here late. I've taken Broncos rookie Audric Estime a couple times down here. 49ers backups Elijah Mitchell and Isaac Garendo are attractive to me down here. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess I have CMC on this team, so I'm not as interested in doing that on this particular roster. Drake Maystack, Jeff just kind of left the board for me at pick 200, so that's not going to happen. I'm not going to go with the third quarterback now. There is an ambiguous quarterback room with the Pittsburgh Steelers between the veteran additions of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and then there's Gardner Minshew with the Las Vegas Raiders still on the board at quarterback to consider. And on this roster, I don't necessarily need to reach there, although at least if I wanted Minshew, I do have the Jacoby Myers stack partner available to me. Looking at probably another running back that could potentially have a big role. I'm not going to take him on this show. Eric Gray has been touted by Giants beats as having a potential chance to earn significantly more touches this year in their backfield, with Saquon gone, with just Devin Singletary now at the top of the depth chart there. That's certainly a player worth being interested in here. I've got a little bit more of him already than I would like to have, so looking to diversify a little bit. Braylon Allen was an interesting rookie running back in the 2024 draft class that I think got a potentially terrible landing spot behind Breece Hall on the Jets, but that's a player that I would definitely be interested in if he's still there for the last pick for me. So let's kind of add him to the queue, so to speak. Chase Claypool just joining the Dolphins. This is interesting down here. Looking at what's available. Can we do Clyde Edwards-Helaire again in the 18th round? I mean, I guess. That's super unexciting. I'd rather take a flyer on one of these guys that I think has a little bit more of a ceiling. I'm pretty sure that we have Pacheco as the number one guy there. In Kansas City, I think they've made up their mind on Edwards-Helaire that he's just purely a backup at this point with not much upside if there's some kind of injury there ahead of him. So Estime, Braylon Allen, my favorite running backs that are still available. Justice Hill and Samaje Perine with the Ravens and the Broncos respectively, kind of jumping off the page for me as far as projections. And we have rookie Rashina Lee with the Baltimore Ravens as well. Man, it's ugly at running back down here. There were some clear late round guys we liked last year down here, but not so much on this year's version of the board. I'm going to go with Braylon Allen. Anything happens to Breece Hall, Braylon Allen is going to be a much, much more interesting asset. So we just finished drafting our 5th Best Ball Mania team of the 2024 season. We have, let's go back to the other screen. We have Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield at quarterback, Christian McCaffrey, Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, Antonio Gibson, Khalil Herbert, Braylon Allen at running back, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen at receiver for our Bears and Buccaneers stacks, with Curtis Samuel, Jacoby Myers, Tyler Boyd, and Demario Douglas to round that out. And then Mark Andrews and Ben Sinnott at tight end. Thank you all for watching this show. I greatly appreciate any of you who spent time with us. We'll be back on another stream later this week to talk more best ball in 2024.